The weapon of rape, accusations against soldiers and rebels of women being targeted for violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The UN now threatens to stop cooperating if no action is taken. How serious a problem is rape in this war-torn country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. It is a country that's been dubbed the rape capital of the world. The United Nations says more than 200,000 people have been raped in the Democratic Republic of Congo since 1998. And now the UN has issued an ultimatum to 2 army battalions accused of mass rape. It is a weapon of war that goes largely unpunished in the eastern DRC, and the UN mission says it will stop working with the army unless legal action is taken against those responsible. Nazanin Moshiri has this report from Goma.
In a country where rape is used as a weapon of war, this woman's story is a common one. She says she was out collecting food and wood when she was raped by Congolese soldiers.
I don't know who to blame. I'm just worried because I'm hungry and I cannot go out to my farm anymore.
The United Nations and human rights groups say they have evidence of hundreds of incidents of sexual violence. They were committed by Congolese soldiers as well as by M23 rebels advancing on Goma last November.
There is no police or armed force that can protect civilians, really, from all the armed groups, not just the 2 you mentioned, but all the armed groups in North Kivu.
Women in camps like this say they're still afraid.
Human rights groups say one of the biggest problems here is impunity. They say that the United Nations and other groups involved in the peace agreement should have a mandate to arrest those accused of crimes against humanity and bring them to justice.
This woman says armed men from the M23 rebel group raped her.
He told me to lie down on the bed, and when I resisted, he slapped me. I was 7 months pregnant then, but he still raped me. When he was done, he called his accomplice, who was standing guard outside, who also raped me.
She says she was targeted because she was married to a Congolese soldier. She gave birth to a stillborn baby, and her husband left her. A study last year by a South African and Brazilian non-profit organisation found that 1 in 3 Congolese men surveyed admitted committing sexual assault. Campaigners say cultural attitudes towards women are part of the problem.
The
woman is sacrificed to show her husband that he no longer has power and to dishonor her husband. They use sexual violence to weaken their enemy.
The UN says it will stop working with certain brigades of the Congolese army if they don't prosecute soldiers who've committed rape. It is more difficult to bring members of various rebel groups hiding in the bush to justice. For now, a toxic combination of war, poverty and lawlessness will continue to make eastern Congo one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a woman. Nazanin Moshiri, Al Jazeera, Goma.
Well, many abuses by M23 rebels and Congolese troops are able to take place with impunity. Let's look at the recent cases that took place in and around the eastern city of Goma. M23 rebels took control of the city in late November last year. Their leaders declared themselves a liberation force and talked about the discipline of their troops. But research by Human Rights Watch found that during their short occupation of Goma, the M23 looted, killed and forcibly recruited army soldiers. They also raped at least 36 women. As M23 took over Goma, the Congolese army retreated to the town of Minova. Human Rights Watch says that over the next 10 days, they went on a raping and looting rampage in Minova and neighboring communities. The rights group documented soldiers threatening to kill women if they refused to have sex with them. Some victims were gang raped in front of their husbands and children. We'll talk to our guests on this in a moment. But first, let's go to Jason Stearns, who joins us on the phone from Eastern DRC. Jason is the director of the Rift Valley Institute, one of the leading think tanks on sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you for being with us. Now, the UN mission, as we understand it in DR Congo, has a mandate to back Congolese army operations against rebel groups, but is supposed to end that support if the soldiers commit human rights abuses. Based on what you've seen there, is that likely to happen?
Well, the UN peacekeeping mission rather has competing imperatives. Part of their mandate says it has to support the Congolese army in its operations. Another part of its mandate says it has to protect civilians in imminent danger and stand against human rights abuses. So in this particular case, those two parts of its mandate clash, and it has to decide what to do. It's now deciding that it's going to stop the support the units that committed these rapes, but it turns out to be relatively difficult to stop supporting one unit and then continue to support to another unit. Very often these units are interconnected, they're under the same command, so it's often very difficult to pick and choose. I do believe they're going to stop supporting these units. I think the bigger question is whether that will have much of an impact.
Do you believe it will?
I think that it definitely needed to be done as a symbolic step. The UN peacekeeping force cannot be taken seriously as a peacekeeping force entrusted by the population if it's seen supporting known rapists. But I think that in the larger picture, the only thing that will bring about a sea change in terms of the behavior of the Congolese army itself is sanctioning the perpetrators and sanctioning their commanders. There have been a lot of prosecutions in recent years of low-level commanders and rank-and-file soldiers for rape, but that hasn't succeeded in changing overall behavior. I think that will only come when the superiors, when the commanders of these units themselves are held responsible for the behavior of their soldiers.
And why is sexual violence such a problem, particularly in the DRC?
There are many reasons sexual violence is a huge problem. Rape has been used for various reasons. It's been used as a weapon of war by various armed groups to intimidate people, to exact revenge upon people. In many of these situations, the armed groups that the Congolese government is facing are groups that are ethnic militia, in other words, armed groups that derive their support from the local population. They recruit from the local population. So when these militias disappear into the forest, the Congolese army often exacts revenge against the people they believe are directly related to these armed groups, their families, their mothers, their sisters. And that's one of the reasons this rape comes up. So as a revenge, you could say, or as an intimidation tactic against the local population. But there are other cases where it seems that rape is used by soldiers as a way of socializing their new recruits. In other words, it's sort of baptism by fire. You bring somebody into the army and you make them do the most reprehensible thing in order to indoctrinate them and socialize them into this new armed group. So there are various reasons, but it's absolutely true that it's become very widespread, and perhaps one of the most disturbing things is that civilian rape has become much more of a problem recently as well. In other words, it seems to be more acceptable now for civilians to rape civilians as well, and that I think has been one of the more disturbing consequences of the past 15 years of war here.
Indeed, a lot of worrying developments there for sure. Jason Stearns on the phone for us from the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Thanks very much for your time. Well, let's talk more about this now with our three guests from New York. Ida Sawyer, DR Congo researcher and advocate for Human Rights Watch. From Paris, we have Marie-Roger Biloa, editor of Africa International, a Pan-African news magazine. And from Nairobi, Marc-Andre Lagrange, Central Africa senior analyst for the International Crisis Group. Good to have you all with us. Ida Sawyer, if I could start with you. I know I asked this question to one of our guests earlier in the program on the phone about the extent of the rape problem, not only in Africa as a whole, but particularly in the DRC. Why do you think that is?
We've been documenting horrific cases of sexual violence by Congolese army soldiers and by rebel groups, and in some cases by civilians. It's become a weapon of war in eastern Congo, used by soldiers and rebels, sometimes like with the case of the Minova rapes by the Congolese army soldiers when they're going out on a looting and raping rampage, and it's almost random those who they target. In other cases, we've seen rebels or soldiers use rape specifically to target members of a particular ethnic group or certain members of different communities, and it's become a weapon of war in eastern Congo.
And based on your research and based on what you've seen there, is this something that is on the increase now?
It's hard to say whether it's on the increase or the decrease. It's very difficult to get accurate numbers of the numbers of people who have been raped. There's still a lot of stigma, and many people don't want to come forward. And often we have rape cases happening in very remote areas where there aren't international NGOs or UN peacekeepers present. So it's sometimes difficult to get the exact scale of the rape in Eastern Congo, but it's something that's definitely still a major problem.
And this reluctance of women to come forward that you talk about, is that presumably a result of the stigma that is attached to rape?
Yes. So there, often women and girls who have been raped feel that they will be rejected by their families or their communities. Their husbands would kick them out of their homes if they come forward as having been raped. So this is a big problem.
Marie-Roger Biloa, what sort of a psychological impact do this sort of thing have on women in these communities? Particularly when you consider, as some of the accounts go, that many of them have been raped in front of their families, in front of people in the village. What sort of a long-lasting psychological impact is that going to have?
By all accounts, we know that this kind of actions, this kind of rape epidemic, this kind of sexual violence is destroying a whole society. And, the heart of so many women outside of Congo are bleeding when we watch this, when we listen to this, because we see that there are groups, the UN, some NGOs trying to help, but you don't see the kind of massive commitment this situation deserves. And, there are not only women who are destroyed, even if many of them are very strong and courageous and try to live on and carry on their lives, but also the children, the child soldiers involved who become rapists. They are destroyed. They are deeply damaged, and the impact is on the whole society. I mean, we are speaking about it now. This has started in around 1998, and the UN puts the figure of the raped women at 200,000. I mean, until 2007, and this is going on, and there is an upsurge of rape right now because they are not only the militia. Now you have the government troops getting involved in that. And whoever is on the ground, I mean the NGOs, all who are trying to help, will tell you that there's not enough security there, that the government troops are not there to help people. They are there to loot them, to plunder. And Mobutu said one time to the soldiers, you have guns, so you don't need a salary. So you see the mentality. This is horrific, and we just need a massive commitment from the international community. There are conflicts maybe in Syria. Nothing is happening much, I must say, but this is a place where all the countries should be doing something, really think, how can we stop that?
What do you think they should be
really
doing
destroying
specifically
a whole country.
then? If you talk about this massive commitment, what form should this commitment take?
Yes, the massive commitment is the kind of thing Barack Obama tried to do at some point against the NRA in Uganda, where they said we sent troops just to stop this rebellion, to stop these people this country having a rebellion which is not ending. If you have massive troops commitment, really something massive, they can do it the way they did it in Afghanistan. These little M23 of these troops, they are nothing against them.
All right. Marc-Andre Lagrange, the fact that this is going on with impunity on both sides of the war in the DRC, the fact that so few people have been brought to justice over this, is in many ways what is allowing this to continue. So what can be done to hold the perpetrators to account?
Well, The first thing is that there was a choice made to have peace over justice, but this demonstrates clearly that you cannot have peace without justice. The other point is that there is a policy, a long-standing policy of integrating militia into the army to basically buy peace from the militias. And this is demonstrating that the events in Minova are demonstrating that basically this policy of incorporation of the militia into the 4DC is turning the 4DC into a militia. Then we have to have a strong commitment from the United Nations and the contributing countries to actually enforce the policies they are passing in New York, the mandates and the statements they're doing in New York from the United Nations, and also to act to stop this. The action taken by MONUSCO recently by saying that they will apply finally the conditionality of a 4DC by stopping their cooperation with some battalions which are accused of committing rapes in Minova is a very good move, a late move, but a very good move. But this should be the first step.
Indeed, and the absence of justice is certainly a sentiment that is being expressed on some of the opinions we've been getting online. Let's take a look at the reaction we've been getting on our Facebook page on this. Jennifer Mabiho says of the UN, how is their stopping going to help bring the culprits to justice? Rape is a very inhuman and humiliating act. I believe if MONUSCO, that is the UN group that is operating in the DRC, has knowledge of who or which sect was involved in this terrible act, they should work more towards ensuring the culprits face justice. And Halima Inua Jibril, threats will not work on these barbaric people. Rather, the UN should take a stance against such actions worldwide. The people, especially women and children, should be protected against all troops. Ida Sawyer, if I could turn back to you on this. I mean, how much of this responsibility falls on the UN? Do they need to play a bigger role in holding these people to account?
I think that the United Nations does need to play a key role in this. It's not just them, it's also the Congolese government. But I think it's an important first step. It's a late step, but threatening to suspend the support to these units responsible for the mass rapes in Minova is the right move. I think so far we have not seen very much progress. The Congolese authorities have opened an investigation into the rapes in Minova. According to the latest information we have, 11 soldiers have been arrested, but only 3 of them for rape cases. And given the scale of the abuses, scores of women and girls raped over that period between November 20th and November 30th, much more needs to be done. No senior officers have been arrested, and they haven't started the trials yet. No one has yet been convicted. So I think it's time now for the United Nations to take the next step and cut their support to these units who are responsible for rapes. But it's also the Congolese government needs to take strong measures to hold those most responsible for these horrific abuses, including the rapes in Minova, but elsewhere as well. And I think, as Marc said, it's this cycle of integrating the worst abusers, rewarding people, militia leaders who are responsible for massive atrocities by giving them senior positions in the army, giving them access to wealth and minerals, positions, etc. That just fuels this cycle of violence and horrific atrocities. So we need the Congolese government to take a strong stance against impunity.
Can the Congolese government, Marc-Andre, actually rein in their army? Are they in a position to do that? Do they have control?
Well, the government of Congo took the engagement in Addis Ababa on February 24 that they will conduct reforms. So I think it is now time for the donors and the Friend of Congo and the United Nations to make sure that the government do implement the reforms that are standing since long time. It is not something new. It is something which is not Well, everybody knows the solution. There is a need for reform of the army. There is a need of reform of the justice. And this is nothing new. What is important now is that there is this document in Addis Ababa under the patronage of Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and this is a chance for the sub-region and especially Eastern Congo to have those reforms to be implemented. And the thing is not, the question rather, is not does the government have the capacity to reform the army, but does the DRC government has the will to reform the army? And I think now they are in a position where the question is not do they want to, but they have to. And the international community has to support this, but not just to support it, but has to make sure it happens. And conditionality by MONUSCO is a very first step, as Ida said, and this should be much brighter policy that reforms have to happen, and political dialogue based on conditionality should be engaged with the DRC government for this to happen in the name of the people of Eastern Congo.
Marie-Roger Biloa, is that what this comes down to for you, the will of the Congolese government to do something about this?
You know, what we are getting wrong here is that we tend to believe that there is a Congolese government which is able to do anything, any reform of justice, reform of the military, reform of this and that. You know, this is a country which is deeply in crisis, as we know, and the current government, maybe if it has control over something, it's maybe over Kinshasa and the territory around it. It has no controls whatsoever on what is happening in the country. We know that. We know that they are not in a position to do anything to improve the situation sharply. So I think the kind of what we have now in Eastern Congo is comparable to what we had in Mali, which urged the French to intervene and stop the jihadists to martyr the population, chopping off hands and doing whatever we know. So this is a kind of emergency we should feel about it, and not just wait until a deeply underdeveloped country which lacks everything like many countries. We know that. We know if we take many countries around, you know, the justice needs a reform, the education needs a reform, the whole country needs a reform. That's why they are not developed countries. So we cannot wait until they solve all those structural problem, basic problem, to stop massive epidemic, rape epidemic in Eastern Congo. We should just feel there's not a byproduct which we should watch and say, well, is war there, so we should discuss with the people and do that. We should really engage in a movement of doing something massively, like in Mali, for instance.
All right, just in the minute or so that we've got left, I want to give the last word to. I just want to give the last word to Ida Sawyer. There, is this what it's ultimately going to take to eradicate the problem of rape as a weapon of war? Is a massive commitment from all sides.
Yes, exactly. You need commitment from the Congolese government, from the United Nations, from the militia groups, and another key factor here is the role of Rwanda in Eastern Congo and their support to the M23 and previous rebellions in the past. And it's going to be very difficult for the Congolese government to effectively implement these reforms or institute state authority in Eastern Congo, while Rwanda is backing rebellions led by abusive commanders committing horrific atrocities on the people of Eastern Congo. So we do have this framework agreement now, which can, hopefully put in place mechanisms to put pressure on Rwanda to ensure that they stop supporting rebel groups in Eastern Congo, but also puts pressure on the Congolese government to move forward with key reforms, and most especially the ability to bring those responsible for mass rape and other atrocities to justice.
Thank you to all my guests. From New York, Ida Sawyer; from Paris, Marie-Roger Biloa; from Nairobi, Marc-Andre Legrand. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.